What is up, guys? It is Quinn here, and in this video, we're going to be running through my top 36 wide receivers heading into week 5. So just like the order I'd be playing these guys this week. While you guys are watching, if you're enjoying the content, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you guys do have any fantasy questions, you can drop those down below. Also, if you want to check back later in the week, maybe I've made some small tweaks on this. So, maybe if you two guys close together, either you can make the call or you can kind of check back in a few days and I'll kind of let you know my updated answer. But let's just jump right into the rankings. And I feel like I have a very clear top 2. And my top 2 is Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey. I feel like both of these players are matchup proof. I think they can both ball out in bad matchups. They can give you elite high ceiling games in better matchups. So I have Saquon at number 1, CMC at number 2. Really the disparity here is just CMC has a really tough matchup against the 49ers. I just think this could be a really disgusting game where the Niners just dominate the Panthers. But Christian McCaffrey is a guy who doesn't need to get into the end zone. He can go out, he can rush for 10 yards and then give you 8 for 80 through the air. Like, that's totally in the realm of possibility. So he has a lot of outs. I feel like he has a very high floor with his pass catching ability. So both of those dudes are locked in at 1 and 2. And then I feel like, honestly, from like running back 3 probably all the way down to like running back 9. I feel like all these dudes are very interchangeable, and a lot of them have semi-underperformed. They're like these elite stud running backs that haven't necessarily lived up to expectation. So I went with Joe Mixon here at 3. The workload is really strong. He finally found the end zone last week. I'm just buying into the workload here on a top offense. The Ravens defense hasn't exactly been shut down, so I think he's a solid play. Then we got Leonard Fournette here going up against the Falcons. Some people may be concerned about Rachaad White kind of breaking in their game against the Chiefs. In my opinion, that was just a weird game script, a weird game where they were down very early on. I'm not saying that Rachaad White won't kind of continue to work in, but I highly doubt Rachaad White is going to be getting full drives. I also think this is going to be a game where the Bucs can put up a lot of points. They're probably going to go ahead early, so they may kind of be running it out at the end. So I think Fournette is a really strong play. I have Austin Eckler here at number 5, going up against the Browns. Finally got into the end zone the last few weeks. I definitely have some, red flags with Eckler moving forward. The lack of usage is definitely not ideal. If he can't turn that around, I don't ever see him breaking into like that top 3, but he's kind of in this stacked tier with Mixon, Fournette, guys I'm going to get into, in the upcoming players. So he's firmly kind of in that tier. I did talk about him as a sell high player, and the main reason was that I feel like people view him a step above the guys like Mixon, Fournette. So if you can get a Mixon or Fournette plus an upgrade at another position, I do think that's something that should be considered. After Eckler, I have Derrick Henry here at number 6. Has really had 2 nice bounce back weeks after a rough start. He goes up against the Commanders. Then I've got Dalvin Cook going up against the Bears. He has definitely been disappointing so far. The overall workload has been solid, so I do think the points are going to follow. A guy who's had a really hot start to the season, Nick Chubb, he goes up against the Chargers. I think this will be a very interesting test for Nick Chubb, because one of the reasons why I wasn't a huge fan of him and talked about him as a sell high, either after week 2 or after week 3, is I'm not sure how he's going to do in these games where they're likely going to be trailing. Now, the Chargers definitely aren't the superpower they were coming into the season. Lots of injuries, but I still think they could kind of go ahead early. And then the question is going to be, is Nick Chubb still getting a massive workload on the ground? Is he getting into the end zone? Or do we see kind of Kareem Hunt kind of take over here, get more of the third down work, the receiving role? So something to watch here, but I still think he's a locked in like top 10 guy. At 9, I have Alvin Kamara, another one of these stud running backs who just hasn't performed yet. He's also been hit with injury. It seems like he's been a limited participant throughout the week. I think he will play. Also a decent matchup here against the Seahawks. Then at number 10, we have James Robinson. And, it may seem crazy to have J-Rob this high after a rough game where he actually got outsnapped by ETN. But this is all about playing the matchups here. The Houston Texans have just been consistently shredded on the ground. I think the Jaguars are likely going to go up early in this game, which is going to be a game script that favors James Robinson. I feel like they're going to use him as a bell cow on the ground, and I think he can give you a very big day. At 11, I have Aaron Jones. He faces off against the Giants. I think just a solid back-end running back 1 play. Another guy who just hasn't had the touchdown luck. The workload has been there. The bigger games are going to come in the future. And then wrapping up the top 12, I have Jamal Williams. He goes up against the Patriots. Interesting game here. I like both the running backs, or I guess all three of the running backs in this matchup. This is obviously assuming that DeAndre Swift is going to be out. If Swift is back, then it kind of turns into this weird situation where we won't know if Swift is 100%, if it's going to be a weird committee again. I would lean towards Swift just sitting out. Jamal Williams was a really solid replacement for them. So I think he's definitely like a fringe running back one play this week if Swift is out. Then at 13, I have Josh Jacobs. And Jacobs was someone who was just not performing through 3 weeks, but I kept kind of reiterating the fact that the workload was there. He just hasn't had one of these spike weeks. The really good news here for Josh Jacobs is that he is getting involved as a pass catcher. Now, I'm not sure if that's something that's going to stick. Coming into the season, we were worried that this was going to be like a full-on committee. Jacobs is getting early down work, kind of splitting the opportunity with Zamir White. They'll now have a third down back. They go out in week 4. He's dominant. He takes a huge share of the snaps. He's getting third down looks. If that continues, he's going to consistently be slotting in here as a borderline or running back 1. Then we've got James Conner here at 14. And I feel like Conner is like a game away from having that Jacobs breakout. The workload has been there. He's been involved in the receiving game. He just hasn't had that monster performance yet. Maybe tough here against the Eagles defense, but I think we got to continue to plug in James Robinson as a solid running back 2. At 15, I have Najee Harris, and Harris is kind of on thin ice here. He's someone who was drafted as like a back-end first-round pick, early second round, and he's definitely not lived up to expectation. And he's not one of these players like Cook, Kamara. I guess you could maybe throw Fournette in there. He's not one of these guys where I still have a ton of confidence in. The reason why we were drafting Kamara was for this massive workload. The Steelers' offensive line is not good. We knew that. We also knew that the touchdowns probably weren't going to be there. What we were betting on was the workload. The workload has fallen off. We've got Jaylen Warren working in. The lack of receiving involvement is very concerning. We saw Warren take a lot of the third down attempts. I mean, that's really pushing Najee Harris into like mid to back end running back 2 territory if that sticks. It's possible he's a little bit banged up. Maybe he starts to regain that role, but there's definitely cause for concern here with Najee Harris. Also, probably not a great matchup here against the Buffalo Bills. One of the best matchups of the week here is the Patriots taking on the Detroit Lions. So I have Ramondre Stevenson here at 16. I might as well just throw in Damian Harris also at 20. I do like Ramondre a little bit more than Damian Harris. He's getting that third down work. They're both getting solid work on the ground. I think both of them are really strong plays this week in a matchup without Mac Jones, maybe without Brian Hoyer, but I don't even know if it really matters. I think the Patriots are going to lean on their run game, and you can make the argument like, okay, they're predictable. The defense will be able to stop it. I don't have a ton of confidence that the Detroit Lions can stop this run game. We just saw Rashad Penny carve through them, so I do like both of these running backs. At 17, I have Breece Hall, and honestly, this may be low for Breece Hall. I truly feel like in the back half of the season, we could be looking at Breece Hall as a borderline top 12 guy, if not someone who's already locked in there. He's been giving you solid fantasy production, and for the first 2 weeks, he wasn't even leading the team in snaps. I don't even know if he was leading in week 3. I don't even think he was. Maybe he was. It was close. But he just continues to pull away from Michael Carter. He's clearly the more talented guy. He's been super involved as a pass catcher. He's getting the third downs. He's eating into the 2-minute drills. Just really positive trends here out of Breece Hall. So someone who I don't think is going to fall out of mid-tier running back 2 territory for the foreseeable future. After him, we have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. At some point, we can keep screaming regression is coming, regression is coming. I still believe regression is coming, but, we do just got to ride the hot hand here. He is someone who I think his value can fall off very quickly if he loses that goal line role, but while he has it, we just have to keep throwing him in here as a mid-tier running back 2. Right behind him, I have Devin Singletary, who really has just taken over this Bills backfield. He hasn't necessarily, given you insane production with that role, but the snaps are there. It's a great offense. He's going to have touchdown opportunities, also being used heavily in the receiving game. So a really strong start. I already talked about Damian Harris at 20. We've got Dameon Pierce here at 21. Definitely more of a one-dimensional running back. I think there are concerns here with the matchup going up against the Jaguars. If they do go behind early, is this a spot where the Texans have to rely on Rex Burkhead? But I still think he's a solid back-end running back 2 play. I honestly feel like the back-end running back 2s to the high-end running back 3s, I feel like a lot of them are interchangeable, And I do feel like it's actually a pretty strong week for running backs, especially through like the top 27, 28, 29, even 30. Like I do feel like it's a pretty strong week for these running backs and is definitely like very concentrated on like running back, 20 to 30, somewhere in that range. I feel like it's a very strong group. So after Pierce, I have Miles Sanders. I'm not going to be someone who's wildly overreacting to his big week 4. Obviously we're going to see a few of those spike games throughout the season. I don't think he's going to see a workload that large. The touchdowns were obviously big for him. I think normally he's going to be a guy who's getting a lot of carries, not a lot of targets on a good offense. I do feel like he has actually some similarities to Dameon Pierce, and you could, talk about how obviously the Eagles are a much better offense, but, Dameon Pierce doesn't have a guy like Jalen Hurts vulturing touchdowns. He's also basically getting all the work on the goal line. He doesn't have a Kenneth Gainwell swapping in, a Boston Scott. So they both are kind of being used in similar ways in their offenses. At 23, I have Jeff Wilson. This may honestly be low for Jeff Wilson in a game that I think the 49ers are going to probably lock up pretty easily. Probably will be ahead, using Jeff Wilson a ton. He's just getting basically all the running back touches, obviously aside from Deebo Samuel. But I do think he's a very strong start this week. Just doesn't really have the receiving upside, so it does make him a little bit touchdown dependent. I have A.J. Dillon here at 24. It seems low having Dillon all the way down here. I don't think it's an indictment on A.J. Dillon. I feel like it's more just pointing to these strong options that have kind of emerged here. So I do think he's a solid start going up against the Giants. Maybe we'll see him get into the end zone for the first time in a little bit. At 25, I have Khalil Herbert. Obviously, this is assuming that David Montgomery is not playing in this game. Herbert, he's going to have a solid workload on the ground if Montgomery's out. Receiving work is probably going to be lacking. We're really just hoping that he does get into the end zone here if you're playing Khalil Herbert. At 26, I have J.K. Dobbins. Maybe a little low here for J.K. Dobbins. I definitely like him long term. We saw him have that nice 2-touchdown day. I feel like people may be overinflating that just a little bit. I do think he'll be really solid long term. When we're looking at the snap counts, he still hasn't, unlocked a massive role. He's sitting at around 50% of the snaps. He hasn't exactly locked down the goal line work, but he is getting a decent amount. I still think he's going to continue to grow on this role. So I imagine week after week, he's just going to continue creeping up these rankings until he's probably locked into like a mid-tier running back 2 slot. Right behind him, I have Kareem Hunt, another dude who I feel like has consistently been a back-end running back 2, just kind of getting pushed out by some of these other stronger options. But, he could go out, score a touchdown or two, and get pushed right back in. I talked about some concerns with Nick Chubb. If this is a spot where the Chargers go up early, they need like a pass-catching back, that could benefit Kareem Hunt here. At 28, I have Nyheim Hines, and this kind of feels like a trap play a little bit. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor is not going to be playing on Thursday night, so I feel like some people may just think, all right, Nyheim Hines is the number 2. We throw Hines in there. He's going to be a great start. I do think he's startable. I think he's a solid flex option, maybe a running back 2 if you're like a 0 RB, hero RB team. I think there are concerns just about how these carries are going to be allocated, and also just if they're going to be able to run the ball at all. Like we saw Jonathan Taylor struggling, this offensive line struggling over the last few weeks. Now you're going to ask Nyheim Hines and some other, practice squad randos to come in and all of a sudden be super productive. I still think he's going to be involved as a pass catcher, which I think will give him a decent floor. But in terms of a rusher, I wouldn't be expecting massive things out of Nyheim Hines. At 29, I have Rashad Penny. People are probably going to think this is a little low. For me, when I look back at his last game, obviously he performed very well, but I feel like we have to attribute a lot of that to just the Lions defense. Now he's going up against the Saints, and unfortunately Penny is still the same running back who has to rely on touchdowns. He's not going to be giving you any receiving work. You've also just got some of these other running backs like loitering in the backfield. Obviously Kenneth Walker's going to be swapping in. They consistently use a third down back. So, I feel like people are going to be, ready to lock him in as a start. I think he's startable, flex option, but not someone that I love this week against the Saints, because I think it's very possible he goes out 14 carries, 70 yards, 1 reception, and he doesn't get into the end zone, and then you're feeling pretty disappointed about his day. A player who's kind of tough to evaluate here is going to be Melvin Gordon at 30. If you would have told me coming into the season that Javonte Williams goes down, Week 5, we're going to have Melvin Gordon as the number 1, I would imagine that I'd have Melvin Gordon ranked as a top 12 running back. That's the kind of upside I saw for Melvin Gordon in, the outcome of a Javonte Williams injury. Unfortunately, Melvin Gordon just has not produced so far. He has struggled, but I still think we have to understand here that we never saw Javonte Williams really take over as the running back one. And the reason why he didn't do that was because they continued to want to feed Melvin Gordon. So even though he's been disappointing, even though he hasn't been able to hold on to the ball, I still think he's going to have the first crack at this backfield. Now, obviously, the offense hasn't been clicking, so it's not as high of a ceiling spot as I was expecting. I still think he's someone who we can start, but I do think we'll definitely learn a lot about this game, and it could range from Melvin Gordon turning unstartable to Melvin Gordon being like a top 15 option moving forward. We're just going to have to wait and find out. At 31, I have Raheem Mostert. Just kind of an interesting situation here and a little bit of a gross backfield with Tua out. They do have a good matchup against the Jets. I think Mostert is a decent play just based on the volume. We've seen Chase Edmonds score the touchdowns, but Mostert has been dominant in terms of the snaps, especially looking at their last game. So like a mid-tier running back 3. I've got Ezekiel Elliott all the way down here at 32. Until Dak comes back, this is just not like a backfield I want to be messing with. Zeke, I have Tony Pollard at 34. Zeke is someone who's going to need to rely on touchdowns to produce. The receiving work hasn't been there. The efficiency hasn't been there. And with Dak not in that lineup, the touchdowns just aren't going to be there for Ezekiel Elliott. And then same thing just in terms of efficiency for Tony Pollard. At 33, I have Brian Robinson. Finally seeing him make his debut here, very likely at least. And then bumping Antonio Gibson out of the top 36. I do think Brian Robinson is going to be the number one moving forward. I'm not overly confident that he's going to get a massive number of carries here, in his first game back. I think it could be a gross committee, but I feel like he's going to build on this over the next few weeks, and he will be that guy moving forward. At 35, I have Darrell Henderson, and it's tough to really rank any of these Rams running backs here, but I feel like Cam Akers has kind of just played himself probably out of this rotation, at least, to a spot where Henderson's going to have more of a role. Henderson hasn't been good by any stretch, but Akers just does not look like he has it. It's unfortunate. It seems like that Achilles tear kind of took a lot of the juice out of him. Obviously, I don't love Henderson. I don't really want him in my lineup, but as a back-end running back 3, I feel like that's where he slots in. And then to wrap up the top 36, I have Tyler Algier going up against the Buccaneers. I don't love the matchup. I think this is going to be a potential committee, but maybe you're super desperate, lots of flexes. Maybe you're throwing in Tyler Algier. He is someone I liked coming into the season as like a best ball pick, so I am rooting for him, but, trying to be unbiased here, not someone I'm super confident with in this matchup. But those are my top 36. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Who should be higher? Who should be lower? Let me know why. If you guys did enjoy the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. And if you are interested in seeing my other set of rankings, I'll have the wide receivers posted today also. So thank you guys for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.